Okay, inverse functions, a very nice question to get. This is sometimes tied in with your exponents and logs because, what makes it harder? But really when you're looking at an inverse function, you've got this reflection across the y equals x line. So if this was y equals 3x, this would be log base 3x. So it's the opposite. Okay. Same for this function. If it was reflected across this line, yeah. And what that means is if you've got a point on here, so say we've got when x is 1, I substitute 1 into here, 3 to the power 1 is just 3. On the other one, well that means when x is 3, y is 1. So you're changing your points around. Yeah, you're mixing up your x and y, you're flipping them over, which is why the first step, what I tend to do, I write out my equation. I'll say, well, g of x is just a fancy way of saying y. That just means I've got a function called g with respect to x, okay, but the outcome would still be y. I could still graph it like this. And the first thing I would do is just flip those variables around to say x is 1/5 y. Oops. 1/5 y, it's very nice y, isn't it? Take away 4, because we're flipping over. The inverse function would have the x and y round the other way. First thing I'll do, and then I would rearrange it. So x plus 4 is going to give me 1/5 y. I remember for rearrange, you're doing BODMAS in reverse. Yeah, so that's why I'm moving the adds and subtracts. So don't forget BODMAS in reverse. You're moving your adds and subtracts, then your multiply, divides, then your powers and your brackets. How do I get rid of this fifth? Well, that's times by 5. And don't forget your bracket at this point. We're timesing everything by 5. And that's almost me finished. I just need to answer the question and say, well, that means that the inverse function is equal to 5x plus 4. So change your variables around. So flip the variables. And then it's just making y the subject. And then you're writing it in the form g to the negative 1x. We can't just leave it as y. And that's where your 3 marks are. First mark for doing your changing the variables. Your second mark for rearranging successfully. And then your final mark for writing it like this. So that's an important point to remember when you've got an inverse function, that the x and y's are round the other way. And the other thing that they'll have to ask as well is to say, what happens if I put in an inverse function into my function? Well, you're just left right back where you started with x. Okay, so don't forget that as well. It's just usually a little one marker they pop up with. You could do the math if you want. You can substitute this into there, but really what you're doing is undoing and undo. You're just going back to where you began. So remember that little rule as well. And yeah, if you try and visualize this, because it does pop up a lot in exponents and logs, it's the reflection around this axis here with the x is now the y and the y is now the x. Okay, hope that's helpful.